Get up and dance, man. Yo, pull up, break down the back door. Kunami, I hit a combo. This a trap, this ain't no chateau. Don't talk if you're trying to beef like taco. Keep the Crocs locked on the feet. 22 years ain't hit my peak. Yeah, go ahead, son, make fun of me. Beat too loud, you got to speak up. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
What's up, Internet? I'm George Edward, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about putting vintage lenses, much like this one, on the Lumix S5 II. Now, if you remember, a few months back at this point, I made a video talking about some recent pickups, and in that video, this lens was one of the main focal points. So this was a lens, I think at the time I spent anywhere between $200 to $300 on, so I could add a little bit more versatility to my kit. The main driver being having a 35mm for the Lumix S5 II whenever I want to adapt it to that. But then also when I use the Fuji GFX 50R, being able to put it on here and have a 28mm focal length equivalent. But to translate that to your world where it might have a little bit more value, if you're looking to create photos and video content, and you're also looking to save money along the way, a full frame video camera with decent photographic quality is a really sound decision. So the reason I wanted to try this was to see if photographers like yourself could adapt lenses to a camera to get more of a filmic look out of the photos that you're taking that aren't all laser sharp and super focused like you might want your video work to be. And so that's where this lens comes in. This thing is really small, so I could put it on this camera and add very little weight, but also when I go out and use it, the overall feel of the camera itself, albeit just feels more manual. And so this video, there's a few things that I wanted to cover before we actually get into the post-processing themselves. So the topics here, and we'll lay them out as chapters, are why you would even use vintage lenses to begin with, right? We might be curious about that, so we'll go through why people use them. 2 is how do you actually adapt these lenses, and what's the process of putting them onto a modern body? 3, the usability and the experience of using a vintage lens, mainly focusing on exposure and manual focus. I think those are the 2 big differences that this will bring to a digital process that could benefit your work a lot. And 4 is the image quality and the aesthetic differences that a vintage lens might bring to an otherwise overly sharp and saturated digital sensor and lens combination. And then last but not least is the actual post-processing of these images. And so once we've gone out and taken these photos, what can we do in Lightroom to be able to make these images look how the rest of our work looks? And for me, the last one was keenly important because I wanted to see how close I could replicate the work that I'm getting out of like the Fuji GFX 50R and how powerful this full frame sensor could potentially be. But for starters, I want to talk about why you might use vintage lenses. For one, people want to use them because they're cheaper. They're just more affordable lenses that you can get. Adapters can get pretty expensive, but depending on the lens you need and you're looking to adapt to the camera, they're relatively affordable. And the other piece of that, right, is they give you this quality that might just be a little bit softened. Which lenses have it, which lenses don't, it's entirely subjective, but you yourself, when experimenting with vintage lenses, will start to figure out which ones you like, which ones you don't like, and more importantly, why you like certain looks and feels that are coming out of the cameras. And before we get into anything overly specific on the actual quality of the images and what the output might look like, for starters, let's talk about like how you'd actually mount the lens. First and foremost, do some research and pick out what lens you want. You can try the Contax lenses if you want. I think they're fantastic. But that said, once you have that ironed out, you're just gonna look for a lens adapter much like this one. This one, I don't even remember. It was like 20 to 30 bucks. I think it was, no, I do remember. It was $29.99. K&F Concept. I got it off Amazon. It's a CY to L lens mount adapter, and it makes it really easy. You just take your lens, take this guy, and find the little red dots, align them, and click. So once you've done that, you have your camera ready to go, and you can start going out and using the lens. Now we can start to talk about the usability of it. When out on the field with a manual focused lens, I automatically feel way more in tune with what it is I'm photographing, especially at a fixed focal length. And so once you have your composition set up, or at least reasonably enough set up, when you actually start to expose and focus on your subject, that's where I find the manual lenses really start to shine. The manual focus on a digital camera, I just really like, especially on older lenses. I don't like the infinity scroll of newer lenses. I like where it has like a hard start and stop on the lens. And then there's also focus peaking on the camera, which I think is really reliable to get sharp focus. What I also do when I'm going ahead and focusing is I set up a quick button so I can zoom in really close into the image itself on the small LCD screen. So I can get laser sharp focus on the areas of the images that I want. And if I'm going for more of a creative focus effect, it allows me to figure out where indeed I should be focusing and on which specific part of the image I should be focusing. So it's really nice. And it's something that took a little bit of an adjustment for me, but doing it on the 50R for so long, it was just a natural transition to do it on the S5 II. And exposure is really nice because it allows me to set whatever aperture I want. And sometimes I'll use that to let in more light, but for the most part, it just allows me to change my shutter speed to let in the amount of light for the fixed aperture that I actually want to stay on. But again, giving me more control and a more manual shooting experience, which as someone who's been photographing for quite a few years now, right, is something I really appreciate. And I don't want the camera to do that work for me. I actually want to make those decisions. One of the things you'll hear a lot on YouTube for photography is that it just has this look, right? People like film because it has this look. People like old lenses because it has this look. People like medium format because it has this look. And though there is a lot of truth to that, I just making fun of it because I think it's a bit overdone. But to say that there is not a look with old lenses is just not true. They just render images in a bit of a different way. Because this lens overall is a relatively sharp lens, I think. It feels sharp. But the reason that I like it is because it does soften up your images a little bit. When I look at the images that are taken by this versus by this lens here, there's just a softer quality to it, a lighter color intensity, just does a little bit of what I want to do in my post-processing activities anyway, but before I even get the image there. And I'm a big proponent for doing everything or as much in camera as you possibly can before editing. So the aesthetic differences are entirely subjective. These will be things that you like or maybe you don't like, and maybe you like the really creative lenses versus the more sharp lenses. It's entirely up to you. But the point being that like experimenting with different lenses will let you start to kind of identify what you like in your images. And as someone who used to shoot film and switched to digital purely just because of the cost of it all, this allows me to still get more of a filmic quality in the images before I even go in and post-process them, which I really appreciate. But now that we've covered the bulk of that, I think where we can really spend the rest of our time is in the images themselves. I think this is where you'll get the biggest appreciation for what this is doing on this Lumix sensor and how we're able to push and pull the colors, get them into a position that we really like, and to get them into a state where we would actually use this work for any professional or just like Instagram type of purpose. Okay, so now that we're actually in Lightroom, we can take a minute to just talk about the images that I got from the other day on a photo walk. For starters, there's one thing I want to kind of talk about, and we'll talk about it a few times here, is the ability to lens correct within Lightroom. So I've already gone ahead and selected my lens, but when you get a vintage lens that you want to use, you can go in when you uploaded your images and look for the lens that you've taken these photographs on. So here's where you could select your lens manufacturer. In this case, Zeiss Contax. Now I would actually select the 35mm. Just to show you what this is doing, you can see a slight warp taking place, almost like a de-fish-eyeing process take place when I enable the lens correction versus having it off. So it takes away any of the warping that was present in the image, all the while softening out the rounded corners. This will be more severe or less severe depending on the lens and depending on the size of your sensor. So for instance, this is more impactful on my 50R because it's a bigger sensor, so the corners get obstructed a bit more. And that's really going to focus around vignetting and corner softness. So it'll brighten the corners and it'll sharpen them. So there's no weird blurriness. And again, in certain lenses, it's very, very obvious. But here, really what I wanted to speak about is just the amount of detail that this lens is able to pull. If we go further, like in this light post here, we can see that there's loads of detail present on here. Not only just detail and like the sharpness, but like visual interest and the contrast differences, texture, all of that's available within this image. The way that this sensor is rendering colors also good. So it gives me plenty to work with when I'm actually going out on the field. And then you have images like this where you have a lot more going on, and I don't particularly love the image, but the highs are intact and all of this detail is present in the plants, the colors, the shadows. Again, it's all there. So I think it does a really good job of actually rendering scenes without actually foregoing any true digital sharpness. This is plenty sharp. And this image I actually walked away extremely happy with. So this image, I think the colors in it are great. It's way more akin to what I would expect to get out of my Fuji. Again, we have like the lens profile correction, making sure that I have really straight, sharp lines here. So I have all of these running through the image, a lot of intersecting lines and visual just kind of cues to look at and feel as the viewer looking through this image. this line running through kind of all of these housings, or these houses like layered together. I won't speak too much about the image, but really when it comes to actually editing this, again, I go through the normal processes that I've gone through in the past, and I'll post a new editing video soon so you can see what my process looks like today. All I have to do is take my SD card, upload it into my computer, put it into Lightroom, turn on the lens correction to get rid of any aberration and just vignetting if there is any. But then so I can go through and do all the adjustments that I would used to do in Lightroom and mess with the grain and the blue saturation and the colors in particular, the tone curves, all to fine tune this image to make it look exactly like I want it to look. But I didn't forego anything on either part of the process. And the reason I wanted to show this isn't because I think you need help editing images. I think you know what you're doing. The point being that you can easily and quickly adapt any of these lenses as you see fit. Once you have images that you've taken that you like, you could lens correct them in Lightroom and start using them immediately. From there, it's your normal editing process. So you upload your SD card, you edit your images, and you're good to go. But you've been able to now take advantage of a more manual lens ecosystem, all the while giving yourself more control while you're taking photographs, but not foregoing any of the advancements that's digital, which is quick uploads and quick editing. So that's it. So, all right, that about covers it. Again, the main reason I wanted to do this was so for the folks potentially like yourself that have one camera that they're trying to make do all of the different types of work that they're trying to put together, this might be a decent option for you. There's no doubt that camera equipment is expensive, and there's no doubt that it's hard to keep up with the quickly evolving landscape that is photo and video camera equipment. It just new stuff comes out and it feels like every year the megapixel count just like quadruples, and to keep up with that would just be extremely expensive. And vintage lenses are a really cheap way to get exploratory in your work. So I do hope you consider it, but at the very least, I just hope this has been helpful. Something for you to explore, something for you to consider, and at the very least, something for you to continue to push your craft into a different area. Because at the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do. So as always, if you liked it, like it, subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Bringing that sound from the underground. Lose control, shout out Missy. All y'all toxic, just like Britney. Get out the way, get up, left lane, right lane, switch up. Now shut up and understand. You don't gotta talk, nah, you just gotta